First at Tufts University and now at Yale University, unsuspecting birds who have been lured to feeders and trapped or netted are being systematically tormented to induce stress and fear. Why? For experiments whose results won't apply to humans or even to other bird species. So this is from a post at Peta.org called Tell Yale University to Stop Tormenting Birds. And it's got like a take action at the bottom to contact the school and to voice your complaint. And it seems all right. It seems like Peta doing what any animal advocacy group does, calling attention to some kind of animal abuse and asking people to act against it. The difference here is that the focus really isn't on Yale. It's not on something faceless, a school or some other organization or a company. Instead, it's on one person. So here are my thoughts on this whole thing. Number one, I think it's a bad idea to focus on animal testing, animal research. Some people think that it's an easy win, that it's like going after trophy hunting. It's something that like most people agree is wrong and really terrible. But I don't think that's true. The issue of animal research is pretty nuanced. For instance, I think many would agree that testing for cosmetics, right, for makeup or something, that testing on animals and hurting animals, that's not okay. But what about for something like cancer research? And what about this case specifically? Again, capturing and ultimately killing birds to study stress. I don't think it's clear how the public on the whole will react to something like this. More importantly, the total harm from animal research is very small, and there's no evidence that focusing on it will somehow help us build up to the real problem of trying to end animal agriculture. Second, the way that this was handled, again, focusing on one person and ultimately harassing this person, I'll get to that in a moment, it's awful. To be fair, I do understand why they included her name. She's not an employee of a company. She's an independent researcher. She chose to do this research. So I think them just making some sort of, stop Yale from tormenting birds and just talking about Yale, I think that would be a little bit confusing. But ultimately, I don't really care about Peta's intentions. The road to hell is paved with, the rest, because the consequences have been awful. They've been awful for Christine. She's received threats. Not only that, but a staged protest was organized to happen at her house, and it was organized by someone working with Peta. Peta needs to be more aware of what people are doing with their name, with their brand. And they also need to be more aware of how mentioning someone's name can lead to things like this, to things just totally getting out of hand with hate mail, etc., and how potentially harmful this is. Basically, they need to be aware that there are some really angry, crazy vegans. It's going to be that way with any sort of movement, right? Look, I've been threatened by some vegans just for saying things that they don't like, and I'm vegan. I really can't imagine what Christine is going through. That's not at all to say that I agree with her when it comes to her research. Despite what she believes, there's really no indication that this is important work. So that brings me to point number 3, Christine's research. It seems pointless. I think she's done a really bad job of explaining what it is that she's doing and why she's doing it. She did update her website a little bit to be a little bit more descriptive, but it doesn't seem to help much. So as I said before, she's capturing wild birds. She's inducing stress. This is what she's studying, which is cruel by nature. And then after the experiments, the birds are euthanized to study receptors. And then most importantly, there seems to be no clear or important applications for most of this. She also seems to contradict herself here. She's worried about the stress responses in domesticated lab mice being altered and not representative, and so that's why she decided not to use them and to use house sparrows instead. But she said the reason she chose house sparrows is because natural selection uniquely favored stress resilience in them. Maybe I'm totally missing something, but to me that sounds like it would elicit pretty much the same concerns. Unfortunately, a lot of researchers don't view non-human animals as having any sort of intrinsic value, and so they feel that, as long as you are killing them with anesthesia, that it's fine. It's harmless. I'm not saying that's what's going on with Christine. I have no idea. It could very well just be that, as I said before, she's convinced herself that her work is important and is worth killing animals for. Researchers have certainly done this in the past, even when their research involves what can only be described as torture and ends up teaching us nothing. She talks about how her work has already led to some important discoveries, essentially that the Deepwater Horizon oil spill of 2010 led to some health problems and deaths in wild animals, because we didn't already know that oil spills are bad. So my fourth and final point is about communication, and I think this is just an example of bad communication on both sides. Christine may be very, very bad at communicating why her research is important, but PR goes both ways. Whether you're a researcher or an activist, you need to be concerned about how you're communicating. It's very understandable that given Christine's poor explanation of her research, an animal rights activist could see this and come to the conclusion that she's catching wild animals and hurting them and killing them for no good reason. When the well-being of sentient creatures is involved, simply expanding scientific knowledge without a clear goal and plan to get there, it just doesn't cut it. It would be so great if researchers and animal advocates could work on improving communication so we can avoid situations like this, because this sort of clash, it's just harmful. It's stressful for researchers like Christine who, she seems like a nice person. She seems like she genuinely doesn't understand why Peta is coming after her and other people are so angry with her. It's very likely not going to change her mind or save any lives. If anything, it's more likely to just push her further away from activists and animal advocacy and push her toward, the people who already agree with her. And ultimately, this is just polarizing the debate on animal rights and creating a lot of bad press for Peta, which is kind of the last thing they need, unless they're really stupid enough to think any publicity is good publicity. They certainly have a long history of shocking campaigns that leave most of us, I think at best, annoyed, at worst, enraged, disgusted. They just seem totally unwilling to accept the possibility that campaigns like this one are harmful overall, and I think that's unacceptable. As I talked about in a recent video on lying for veganism, doing good means considering all of the possible consequences of our advocacy. You can't just make graphic comparisons to the Holocaust or release a young woman's personal home address and expect the majority of people to be open to your message. But let's say that Peta's campaign was actually successful, that they actually did get Christine to stop tormenting birds, to stop her research completely. Not only this research, but any future research as well. She's never going to conduct any sort of testing on animals. There's still a good chance that this would not be a win for Peta or for animals. Sure, those specific birds would benefit from not being captured and killed, but harassing a young researcher to the point of submission? How would this look to non-vegans, the people we are trying to reach? Would this negatively impact their view of animal rights, animal advocacy? If we care about reducing animal suffering, we need to be asking these questions. Peta needs to be asking these questions. It's a real shame. I want to like Peta because they have some good stuff. They have some really good stuff on their website, some really good pragmatic information, particularly when it comes to food. I love the little short thing on small amounts of animal products in, certain food items. I've shared that before multiple times in videos. It's really good. Their view on parent companies, well, sometimes, in the past they've gone after parent companies for stuff, but I just read a thing about NYX, I think it's pronounced, NYX, the makeup drugstore makeup brand. I guess a few years ago they were bought by L'Oreal, so L'Oreal is now the parent company, and people were really concerned because prior to that, NYX was cruelty-free, and Peta was like, no, the NYX products are still cruelty-free, don't worry about it. It's that's really great, because I've talked about this before, a lot of vegans will just be like, no, you can't buy it anymore because it's owned by a company that tests, even though the products themselves are vegan, you can't buy them. It's really ridiculous. Yeah, so they hold some really pragmatic views sometimes. But then, I don't know, when it comes to their campaigns, a lot of their campaigns, they're just, again, trying to shock you, I guess. They're just really toxic. Luckily, it seems like things have changed a little bit as far as how people view Peta. I don't think it's as much associated with animal advocacy. It used to be Peta and, animal activists were the same thing. And now I think Peta is just considered its own toxic thing that everybody hates, right? I think that's mostly, I would say, probably because of organizations like Mercy for Animals and Humane League, like these really good organizations that like don't do this kind of stuff. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. Of course, comments and questions down below. If you want to subscribe, that's totally awesome. And if you want to support the channel, that's also totally awesome. And you can do that at patreon.com/unnaturalvegan. Thank you again, and I will have a new video very soon.